Well, I'm going to present this narrative. Actually, it's more of a narrative than a video because it's in response to I saw a lot of disparaging, smear tactics in the media, and honestly, the media just goes along with whatever the prevailing winds are that the money presents. That's really what they do. People write in the media, or they announce in the media, or whatever. Or they display on the airwaves. They really just push the prevailing money angles that are present at the time. So I want to, and this is really addressing the Orlando Sentinel. I saw some articles by them. I saw on News Station 9 down here in Florida talking about the Kirby Smith statue that's being relocated in Florida. And first off, I'm not even going to directly address that, but I'm going to indirectly address a lot of the main characters during the quote-unquote Civil War, or the invasion of the South by the Northern money interest. And quite accurately, the war between the North and South could be said wasn't really won by the North. It was won by certain money interest in the North. It really didn't help the people in the North. Everybody who fought in the war lost. So we're going to go over this article that actually was put out by a Floridian. Um, President Grant's exploitative economic plan. What was going on after the war between the states was there was some problems going on with the economy. Part of it was there was massive railroad expansion, and you could tell that was the main group that really won the war, the railroads themselves. Abe Lincoln was a very highly paid, super high fees for the railroads. He wasn't really a career politician. Actually, he turned down a governorship one time to run for a governorship because it would have been such a cut in pay. But Abe Lincoln did quite well for himself even as president, because where he bought property just happened to be where the Transcontinental Railroad started. But anyway, after the first Transcontinental Railroad connected Omaha with Sacramento during President Grant's first year in office in 1869, other railroad tycoons sought government financing to build additional lines. Herein was actually the main crux of the problem, where there was a lot of friction between the North and the South, was that the South was paying the majority of the money into the federal coffers, between 80 and 85% of the money coming into the federal coffers, and the majority, and of that money that was being put into those coffers by the South, which was most of it, it was being taken out by northern industries, mainly the big railroads. As a matter of fact, the government was in debt in 1860 due to all the heavy subsidies of the railroads. If you look at the Confederate Constitution, they forbade certain types of infrastructure spending to be financed by the federal government, because basically it's the same kind of deal that's going on today, really. They forbade omnibus blanket spending bills. They advocated for line item veto. There's a lot of limits on government, but not just government. Don't think of it as government. Think of government as a big regulatory agency that could be used potentially to stop upstart competition for monopolistic capitalists, and also finance those monopolistic capitalists, and also set in place policies, regulations, and rules that could help those monopolistic capitalists. That's really what the war between the states was about. But it wasn't a revolution. It was actually a split. We just want to be independent. We don't want to be part of this racket anymore. So, the way they were financing this was through Jay Cooke, whose investment company was a leading underwriter of federal bonds during the Civil War. See, people were making a lot of money during the Civil War, so actually there were certain people in the North that advocated the war to continue because they made a lot of money. Originally chartered by Congress in 1864, the Northern Pacific had not built a mile of track since it started, right? And Cook reasoned that he could get a bargain price for everything. So what he did was he got the money from Congress and he paid for the railroad, okay, in short. So it also permitted Cook to collect a $200 fee in stock for every $1,000 of bonds he sold, but he also got a 12% cash commission. So you could see there was a lot of people making a lot of money off there. So there was a lot of actually stories in the media about vast amounts of railroad corruption, bribery that was going on after the war between the states. The railroads, you could say it was big industry in the North. It was the main winners of the war, but if you look particularly, it was the railroads particularly, and that was Abe Lincoln's whole, bread and butter. He was a representative, a legal representative, and he was on their payroll. That's how he got to be president. That's really the whole issue right there. I know they kick around an issue with slavery back and forth, but there was maybe in the North 3% of the population at best that were abolitionists. 97% really could care less about slavery. And I'm not just talking politicians, I'm talking average people. The vast majority of states in the North did not allow any freed blacks to settle there, including Abe Lincoln's home state of Illinois. Come on. I mean, it's like why do people not understand this? And what kind of aggravates me sometimes is, I don't really think of it as Confederate heritage. I call it defending Confederate honor. Who was really wronged here? Now, actually, on this video, I'm actually going to go into a lot of defending the honor of the Lakota. And also remember that Stand Watie was not Lakota, but a Cherokee from present-day Oklahoma called Indian Territory. He was the highest-ranking Native American on either side of the war, and he was the last Confederate to surrender. He was actually winning battles after Appomattox happened, and they surrendered. Lee surrendered. General Stand Watie, Cherokee, was actually fighting on and winning, believe it or not. So, after you're done with this, you're probably going to realize that, Grant was a tool of Lincoln. Lincoln was a tool of the railroads. Now we also have Custer involved with this, and you'll see how he gets involved. The railroads were still generating very little revenue. Nearly all its operations and construction were funded by debt, the debt being coming from the U.S. government. As of March 1873, congressional report about corruption and political bribery involving the original Transcontinental Railroad was just such a factor. So it was acknowledged in the congressional reports, but it was also acknowledged left and right in the media that there was vast amounts of corruption going on, not just in the business circles, but also all the governmental officials and towns that the railroads went through. And all this corruption money was actually coming through from the sale of these bonds, which that Cook guy was making a 12% commission on, and also federal subsidies. They're the ones that won the quote-unquote Civil War. Not necessarily the North, because the average person didn't get any of this money. Certain guys. Cornelius Vanderbilt, right? Oh, yeah, and then you got Gloria, who's the son of Gloria? Anderson Cooper, right? Yeah, keep listening to their spiel because they'll tell you the truth, right? Yeah, sure. Anyway, the public perceived the scandal as an indictment of the widespread immorality within the railroad industry and the federal government. See, this is nothing new, what's going on today. The people are bitching about the too bigs to fail and bailouts and can't say this and you can't say that on YouTube or whatever. I don't know if you can let me say this. Anyway, nonetheless, J. Cook and the company collapsed on September 18th, 1873. That was whereby, they call this the Panic of 1873 and the Great Depression, which lasted for 5 years. And it's also the time they demonetized silver. And they said silver was no longer money. Believe it or not, that's what happened. Silver prices went down. It's not in this article, but I'm kind of just talking around this article. So no one was more surprised than if snow had fallen during the summer noon. In other words, they knew this was going to collapse. It was so rife with corruption. But this was, not the North per se, but the financial interest in the North that really won the war. And what they were doing after the war was, it was the railroads that won. And they were using the money, squandering it, bribery, loads of corruption, and they finally ran out of cash. Right here, ran out of cash. So Cook's failure triggered a panic of 1873, which resulted in a 5-year depression, like I said, which also was the time when they demonetized silver. And the New York Stock Exchange was actually closed for 10 days, amplifying the panic. So business failures in 1873 climbed to 5,000 from 4,000 in less than a year, and actually from 3,000 in 1871. So business failures almost doubled within 2 years. Track construction across the nation declined by a third within a year. They caused 500,000 layoffs. A lot of the prices of iron dropped drastically, and also wages for the workers dropped 50% from 1873 to 1877. So when wages drop, people have less money to spend, and that affects the economy all the way around. This was all caused by this massive influx of subsidy money from the federal government that poured into the railroads. They built 33,000 miles of railroad track between 1865 and 1873. Totally rife with corruption. Public all knew about it. The Congress knew about it because the Congress investigated it. It's all documented. So, what were they going to do about this problem in the economy? Now, back in 1848, they had the California Gold Rush. That actually helped boost the economy when they found gold, right? In California, right? In 1848. Now, actually, by 1857, there was another downturn in the economy. That's all part of even what led up. That's another aspect that led up to the South seceding from the Union and stuff. A lot of different angles. Slavery wasn't even, some people say it was an issue. It wasn't an issue. As far as the Northern money interest goes, it wasn't an issue. The only reason they would even call it a remote issue was it had to do with the type of industry that would vote them out of getting their subsidy money in Congress. In other words, the southern agricultural plantation industries would say no to subsidies going to railroads. That is the only reason the Northern Railroad money interest didn't want the expansion of slavery into the West, which was also been interfering with where they could lay railroad tracks, and it would also stop the white settlers from getting free land. It had nothing to do with humanitarian reasons at all. I got to put this out like this because people, I don't think anybody puts it out the way I do, but whatever. Because they don't really get into how the scam is, and this is what I see. I see the scam that's going on. So President Grant reflected about how the gold discoveries in California, which is back in 1848, and the Rocky Mountains had properly energized America's economy. So he heard that there was some gold in South Dakota, in the Lakota area, in the Black Hills, right? So the Black Hills were part of the Lakota Sioux Reservation, officially off limits to white civilians. So what they did was they put a scam out, and they said, they were there, they were going to be searching for something else. In other words, they changed the expedition's goal that they're out there doing a wilderness hunt party or something. I forgot what they used. They used another excuse. They didn't say they were looking for gold. We're over here for other reasons. We're not looking for gold, So, but they really were looking for gold. So Lieutenant Colonel George Custer, you remember him, right? Led the 1,000-man expedition, including President Grant's eldest son, as well as 3 newspaper reporters, a photographer, and 2 gold miners. We're not looking for gold. Yeah, right. And they did find some modest but tempting quantities of gold. So soon a rush of prospectors went tearing through the Black Hills. Hey, there's gold. Let's get the gold. even though it was all Lakota Indian territory or Lakota Native American people territory. Anyway, within the 2 years, the largest gold deposit of the continental United States, ultimately to become the Homestake Mine, was discovered. I don't know if I think Moen Mine is down there too somewhere. We actually, back in my more heyday, we tried to get with some people from New York to get in ownership of part of his mine without putting any equity up forward. But I don't want to talk too much about that. But I am very much familiar with a lot of different things that go on in circles, so don't underestimate me, even though I talk plain. A year after the discovery, George Hearst and two partners purchased the mine for $70,000. A lot of money back then, I guess. Before ending in production, 2001, $70,000. Homestake yielded $1 billion in gold. Pretty good investment. George Hearst was the father of William Randolph Hearst, the the newspaper publisher, and also the guy that was involved in stopping hemp as being legal. Hearst, DuPont, and Rockefeller were the main ones, I think. I don't know if there was another one main ones, but there were three of the main ones that stopped hemp from being legal, where you can grow like hemp fiber for paper, because he was heavily invested in something else, I think, for his paper mills, for his publications. So George Hearst was involved in buying up the mine, and his son, to help fuel him out, fuel his empire. So initially, Grant made little effort to control the prospecting within the territory of the Lakota, because there were so many prospectors, and he's figured, whatever. So then he decided that the government must acquire the Black Hills from the Sioux to protect them from the prospectors. I'm here from the government. I'm here to help. So I'll take all your land and we'll regulate it. So in 1868, the Treaty of Fort Laramie granted their tribes ownerships of the Black Hill in perpetuity, forever, right? In perpetuity. And so the Lakota said, why you can't take it? You gave it to us forever. Now, that's not an Indian giver, that's a white man giver, okay? But these are Union guys. These aren't Confederate guys. This is the result of the Confederacy losing the war. You remember that the Cherokee, which I know they're not the Lakota, but if you look in the North, there wasn't like American Native peoples fighting in the North. And there sure wasn't any generals up there like Stan Wadey. So, anyway, Grant told Red Cloud that the Indian leaders must confront two unpleasant truths. First, the government obligations under the treaty to supply rations for the Sioux reservation had expired, so we don't have to give you any food. That was the one thing, Second, Grant could not prevent the miners, so Grant was going to say, I'm going to sit back and let these miners take your territory anyway. That's what he said. Nice guy, huh? This is Grant, the hero that came down to free the slaves. Along with George Custer, he was in that army too. Sure. Tell me another one, okay? It's like, what is it? Al Gore saying, the oceans are going to rise and I'm going to buy beachfront property here in California. I think a multi-million-dollar mansion. Yeah. Actually, you're not supposed to say anything about that. And hopefully you'll let me say this too, but, I don't even think the people that tell you this stuff that you're allowed to say or not, they don't believe it themselves. Curiosity too, just to get on that point and sidetrack on that point. I was looking at 1600 Amphitheater Parkway in California, where Google is located, the headquarters with all the servers and stuff. I was wondering how much above sea level they are. The road is at 0 feet. Maybe the building's maybe 10 feet because they pumped it up when they usually build a little dirt fill around there. So they don't believe in global warming either. So they probably don't believe their own story about, the North was fought to free the slaves. Yeah. So they probably don't believe it either. But you know what? There's always this financial angle to why they lie about something. What burns me up, though, is you got local papers and local news media in Florida, saying that General Kirby Smith was like an evil guy because he fought for slavery. Wrong. You guys are the evil guys, because I'm pointing out this is the real North. The real North, and let's just call it the North, because let me say this. I'm from New Jersey originally, even though I'm half Italian and half Confederate. That's one way to look at it. My father's side is South Carolinian, all the way back. I'm actually in the Sons of the American Revolution and, the Sons of the Confederacy, right? I'm also in the Sons of Italy from my mother's side, right? So I'm going to tell you this: there's so many Italian Americans up north that have no Confederate heritage. Like I got half Italian, half Confederate, right? They do not like people messing with these Confederate statues, even though they don't want nobody messing with the flag or nothing. The Confederacy's got allies up there. Not with Cuomo or de Blasio, or definitely not Nancy Pelosi, but most of the Italians up there in the Northeast, you'd be surprised. So I don't want to say it's just a northern thing. It's a certain financial element that is the enemy of the people, both north and south. That's really what's going on. So the Indians didn't like the deal that Grant was going to give them, with the money for the territory. So the Indians said, that's peanuts. You owe us at least 10 times that. So Grant said no. So he ordered that the Sioux be starved until they agreed to cede the hills, the Black Hills, at a price set by Congress. Lowball price. Now, if this Grant guy and this Custer's guy had Italian last names, they'd be saying this was the mafia doing this to the Sioux Indians. You know that? The mafia don't do this type of stuff even. The mafia, which they're not supposed to call them the business, Cosa Nostra business guys, they do not do these kind of things. They're not even as bad as the U.S. government. But, U.S. government's got to justify their job, so they got to have an evil bogeyman. Just like they have, the Indians are wild animals and blah, blah, blah. They used to say that shit way back when? They always say this about Italian Americans. So, there's allies. You know what? We just got to get all these groups, various groups together and going after these yo-yos freaking slamming the Confederacy, and then they're done. Anyway, but Grant settled on a more radical solution. He resolved to contrive a reason to start a war to justify seizing the hills by force. And this is where Custer came into hell, apply, whatever. So, what they did was, basically they started a war with some hunting parties. And what happened there is, well, the faction that they started the war with, what happened to Custer. He got wiped out. He got totally wiped out. The Lakota had the repeating rifles. I think they had the Henrys, or I don't know if they were Winchesters at that time. They definitely weren't Winchester 1894s. I think they were 1873s, or maybe they were Henrys or something, but they had repeating rifles and they had a lot more firepower. So Custer got wiped out, the Union guy. The guy that was before trying to free the slaves, now he's just trying to start a war with the Native American peoples to wipe them out and get their land so they could steal all the gold, which they said the land was theirs forever and ever, which was their land forever and ever going all the way back, right? So, where's the honor in the North? They're always freaking picking on the South, right? So the Army launched a 3-day pronged offensive against the off-reservation Lakota in June 1876. So, the 7th Cavalry Regiment under Custer's command, they got wiped out. So what happened was they tried to say, since Custer started this war against the Lakota and some hunting bands that were really, the Lakota had to hunt for food or else they died. I mean, it was like the government cut off their food, so the Lakota had to go hunt for food, and then they said the Army, U.S. Army said that these same Lakota that were hunting for food were now wild bands of Indians, and we got to tame them and all this crap. We were really trying to just steal their land for the gold. So, but what happened was the Indians annihilated Custer's troops. But then, what happened after that, The big guns came in from the Army, and then you know what happened there, right? That was the end of that. So the Indians said that the Fort Laramie Treaty required that 3/4 supermajority vote by the adult males, the commissioners, and to you know, actually go along with the raw deal that the government was going to give them, right? But the commissioners of the U.S. government replied that the treaty had been abrogated when the Indians attacked the cavalry. You see, it was the other way around. But whatever, you know. But then this was like really perplexing to the Sioux who had remained on the reservation, and they didn't even fire a single shot. So since some hunting parties got goaded into attacking the 7th Cavalry, whose these hunting parties were just trying to get food for the tribe, it's like everybody's guilty. That's the way the U.S. government did it. But you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to get the money from them, the gold, basically. So what happened was, anyway, you know, it's like the same kind of deal. It's like whatever appears to be on the surface isn't what goes on. Just like with the war between the states. Just about every history professor out there today, they don't get paid, they don't get grants, they don't get nothing. Actually, on YouTube, you don't even get paid sometimes if you say something too much. Hopefully, I'm not. Anyway, so yeah, probably with that amphitheater parkway being at 0 feet elevation, and you know you're not allowed to say anything about global warming or being a hoax or something. I don't know if they pissed them off there, but I don't know, maybe not. So what the deal was, the raw deal that the Indians got, or the Lakota Native American tribes, or whatever, got, was that they had to go move to present-day Oklahoma, forfeit their firearms and horses, and there would no longer be supplied rations. Notice they got to take the firearms too. No firearms for you. So, Sioux descendants litigated the agreement well into the 20th century. In 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court awarded 8 Sioux tribes $106 million in compensation for taking the tribal property. And the tribes refused it because they said it was still a raw deal, $106 million. But this was awarded in 1980. But by 2011, they kept it in an escrow. Since it was awarded, so they kept it in an escrow account. The $206 million grew to $1.3 billion as of 2011. So they got a few bucks over there if they want to ever draw it. That's not bad. Anyway, the lower court, before the Supreme Court ruling, had said a more ripe and rank case of dishonorable dealing from the U.S. government will never, in all probability, be found in all our history. Now, these are the main guys. Now, it wasn't Abe Lincoln, but it was all his people. Abe Lincoln was already dead by this time, but I'm pointing out Abe Lincoln was an attorney and a big advocate, or, you know, on the payroll for the big railroads, who were really, if you're looking at the northern industry, the northern money interest, you want to look at the biggest northern industry in there and the biggest money power was the big railroads at that time. That's who won the war, not necessarily the North. And like I said, there's a lot of people up north that totally disagree with you people when we're removing these Confederate statues. There's a lot of people that are Italian that have came from the North, and they're down here in Florida, and they're mad that you're messing with these statues. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. You know, you don't hear about them on the media, though, but I'm telling you, okay? So, you know, the other side of it is, too, you know, here's the big general, later president, Grant, Ulysses S. Grant. He's all orchestrating this stuff. He's the one that did it. And you got another guy in there, Custer. You know, he was a you know, Union officer. He was a general or something, I think. You know, he was different ranks. I think after the war he became a captain and he became a lieutenant colonel or something. But you know, it's like the whole thing's a scam. Everything you read in history is pretty much a scam, and unfortunately, the history professors. Now, I learned a few things about history even when I was up in New Jersey. I went to Seton Hall Prep, actually, And there was a retired Fordham University professor that when I was 16 years old up there, he was telling us all this stuff about history with, you know, Pearl Harbor, Abe Lincoln, you name it, man. The Lusitania, sailing into German waters. He says, God, if I went out there and I talked all this stuff about Abe Lincoln, I'm telling you today, I'd be shot. He was, so I learned some of this stuff, not all of it. I learned more, but I was exposed to this stuff, ooh, God, I don't know, probably for close to 50 years, 45 years or more than 45 years. So, almost 50 years. Not that I know everything, but, you know, I already was aware that Abe Lincoln is not what people think he is. Actually, if you look at, I don't want to say the name because actually YouTube said this video is not monetary friendly. It was about Albert Pike, and there's one Confederate general, and if you look up Albert Pike, he was not a nice guy. He wasn't like President Jefferson Davis or Robert E. Lee. But they'll never have President Jefferson Davis or Robert E. Lee, like extremely honorable people, or Kirby Smith in Washington D.C. But they'll have Albert Pike, and he's actually right on the same street, I think, as Abe Lincoln's big monument, whatever you want to call it. You can dig up a lot of stuff about Abe too, man. But these people that portray all these scams that are telling us, the way they're relating what really went on and what the reasons are. They don't even believe it themselves. It's like Al Gore buying beachfront property, practically beachfront property in California, when he's saying, the oceans are going to rise and we're only going to be underwater. Why are you buying this house over there? Even Google, it's like their 1600 amphitheater Parkway right on the bay there. I know the road. I look at Google. I said, so let me look at the elevation. The road itself is 0 feet. I was like, you guys better move up to the Sierra Nevada if global warming is going to melt the ice caps. What are you doing down there? Maybe they don't believe it, But how come they're giving me crap? Well, you know what it is, because I'm not pulling the line for the money interest. They don't like. I don't know. What do you want from me, man? What do you want from me? So, anyway. But yeah, I am actually from New Jersey, up near New York City, and I got genuine Confederate heritage for real. South Carolina, right where Sherman went through. That's where my family's farms were. Sherman did his march to the sea through Georgia down to Savannah. Then he turned through South Carolina, and he really tore up South Carolina worse than Georgia because they were the first ones to break loose, right? And his path went right through my family's farms, man. And I have 4 direct descendants that were in the war. They were very active in, the 8th Regiment, South Carolina, 21st Regiment, and also you go back 2 generations, 3 generations from there, South Carolina under General Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox. I mean, next thing you're going to be saying, the American Revolution was this and that. Then the next thing you're going to do is they're going to be attacking me because I'm in the Sons of Italy. They'll say, Italy, this, then, I don't know. What are they going to do next? But actually, I'm taking up on this Confederate stuff a lot because I already know that the Confederates actually are very, very righteous. The CSA was very righteous. You got to look at the whole document. I have a video on it. I'll put it in a link. I don't know how good I did the video or not, but it did display the main points of the CSA's Constitution. And you could see it was really putting a lot of limits on the federal spending and who could just pull out the money from the federal government and subsidize infrastructure. And you could see this is what happened right after the war. The railroads were going ballistic, building railroad tracks, rife with corruption, paying off everybody, and when the whole boom went bust from astronomical corruption, and all these people were grabbing all this money, like guys selling bonds, and he's getting 12% commission. Well, you must make a couple bucks there. And what happened? President Grant, former U.S. Ulysses Grant, freeing the slaves, hatches a plan to steal the land from the Lakota tribes in South Dakota because we can grab the gold and that can help us out economically. Gee, you think this guy's really give a crap about anybody? No, they care about money. That's kind of like what Abe Lincoln was about. Boy, he could talk, though. He could talk nice. But he's an attorney. Okay? That's what attorneys do. They advocate for whoever pays them. Who was paying them? Yeah, it's like this thing says, Great Northern Railroad across his back with the greenback. You can barely see it. It's like an image. That's really who was paying him. And everybody that was fighting on top generals on the top, they all knew where the money was coming from. Look what happened with Sherman, Tecumseh Sherman. He went west, and he was wiping out the Plains Indians left and right. He went down to Georgia to free the slaves? Yeah, right. Tell me another one. So, I mean, when they're knocking these, they're saying this about these statues, what are they really doing? They got another game. And I'm really, these people that are writing in the Orlando Sentinel, Florida, and also News Station 9, Florida, they're intelligent enough to know what's going on. They don't care. You know, if this was 1850 and you had plantation down here in Florida or something, say North Central Florida, they'd be telling you, they'd be writing completely different. Because that's what they're paid to do. You know? Actually, there was probably more abolitionists down south than there was up north. You know why? Because the big plantations were really hard on average, which was a vast majority of people, white small farmers. How the hell are you going to compete with this big corporation plantation that's highly efficient, that has, it's a setup? How am I going to compete with this? You can't. They don't like that. Actually, there was way more abolitionists down south than there was up north. That's why I say, it wasn't even a factor, slavery. What was a factor was the type of industry down south that was paying the taxes that would have voted against the railroads and other industries from grabbing all that money in through federal subsidies to pay for their projects. That's why the North didn't want that particular type of industry, agricultural industry, to grow and get bigger politically where they can outvote them. That was the only reason they didn't want it. Well, it's not the only reason, but that was one of the major reasons why they didn't want the expansion of slavery in the West. Because that industry would have stopped the northern railroads from getting, when they got more political clout, they would have stopped the northern railroads from getting the subsidy money. But the other thing was, if there's plantations, guess what? How are the railroads going to get through the plantation? Right away? Nah, you can't do that. You can't put a railroad right through here. But then the other thing is, they wanted free land, stolen from the American tribes, the American native tribes, for white settlers. And, the crux of it is, even after the war between the states, the vast majority of states up north did not allow any freed blacks to settle there. Including Illinois, where Abe Lincoln came from. I don't know. What am I, a bad guy for telling the truth? What's the matter? What's the matter, huh? And I'm saying this again. A lot of people up north, in the Northeast, that are Italian, that are actually 100% Italian. I'm half, right? I'm actually half DNA, which is quite a bit. My dad might have had some from, he's Confederate. He's got some Italian in there somewhere. Maybe from Beauregard. But, yeah, I always tell people up north that Beauregard was half Italian. He designed that flag, too. Beauregard, Pierre Tarrant, Beauregard, whatever, PT, whatever, and PGT, Beauregard. He designed that flag, man. The one the media don't like. He was half Italian. But, if you're looking at Abe Lincoln's group and what happened, all these people that came after him, Grant and Cook and Custer and all this other garbage and Sherman, if they had Italian last names, the media would be saying, they're the mafia. Italians don't even do anything near what these guys do. Not at all. So, Confederates got some allies up north. Believe me. Over and out.